Welcome back to the kitchen, everybody. This is your boy, the Mad Chef, and tonight is yet again another very special Better Than the Box. We are really putting the frozen food section on notice. And tonight, we're going to be going after Zatarains. Yep, and you guys know how much I love Louisiana, New Orleans, and Cajun cooking. So we're not even going for the dry stuff that's on the shelf. We're going straight to the frozen section. Yet again, we're going to be recreating their Cajun chicken carbonara pasta. And we're going to do this with a little more authenticity and a little more of a traditional and respectful fusion style. What that means is there's going to be absolute respect and integrity shown to the original cuisine that brought us this dish, which would be spaghetti alla carbonara from Italy. And then we're just going to give it a Cajun twist. We're going to be making everything from scratch outside the pasta. And so let me give you a quick rundown of ingredients. This is 3 boneless, skinless chicken breasts that I've cubed up. This is a 4-ounce package of Del Duca Italian brand pancetta. Traditionally, when you're making carbonara, you're going to want to use guanciale, which is basically a smoked, cured sort of pig cheek. I can't find that here. There's no Italian market. There's not even a Mexican store in this town. But unfortunately, what I did do here, and this is a rookie mistake, is I did not get quite a big enough package for this carbonara. So we're supplementing that with 3 slices of thick cut bacon that's been chopped into these tiny pieces. Now the difference between pancetta and regular bacon is this pork belly here has not been smoked at all. It has been seasoned and brined. It says it's uncured, but it's been seasoned with sea salt and spices and sugar and wine and some vegetables, stuff like that. Some celery juice, I think. And it's basically a leveled up sort of bacon from Italy. It's center cut. It's a different kind of texture, but we definitely need that since we don't have guanciale. And this is my homemade Cajun Creole seasoning, which you've seen me cover before. I'll get into this again later for those of you that are new to the channel. Get down, kitty. No, I didn't touch the cat. And that's going to be the base of flavor for our chicken, and it's going to be in our carbonara sauce. So this is an equal blend, 50-50, of Parmesan cheese and Pecorino Romano, and I mean real Pecorino cheese. Now, you used to be able to find Pecorino wedges at Walmart, but they no longer sell that because they do love to let me down. So guys, I'm using the 4C Parmigiano Pecorino mix. You have to use Pecorino cheese. No excuses, ands, ifs, or buts. That is the primary flavor. So without further ado, let's get started. All we're going to do now is take this beautiful Creole Cajun seasoning and get it mixed into our beautiful chicken. And now that all of our chicken has been completely covered, we're going to get this to the stove and start searing it off. In a nice sized pan over medium-high heat, we've got a nice layer of extra virgin olive oil. And you can see that it's ready because it's nice and shimmering. So all we're going to do now is add in our chopped Cajun chicken chunks. And all we're going to be doing from here is searing it and cooking it until it is fully cooked. No undercooked chicken, guys, because this is not going to have enough heat later on to finish it up. So this has to be done. And this should take anywhere between 8 and 10 minutes to complete it. And while that's happening, we're going to go ahead and start assembling our sauce. And for our creamy carbonara sauce, you're going to take your heavy cream and tell it to right off. Cream has no place in a carbonara sauce, so it should not be used. I'll explain to you in depth what carbonara sauce is made of. It's basically an emulsion of egg yolks and whole eggs with that pecorino cheese. And we're going to get that blended up real nicely. So what I have in this bowl are 3 egg yolks and 1 whole egg. And what we're going to do is we're going to get that beat up and blended really well. And then in small batches, we're going to slowly add in our pecorino and Parmigiano mix, making sure that the cheese gets broken down. Now, guys, this honestly works best with fresh grated pecorino. But again, I cannot find that. So this is going to have to work, and it will work. This does work. But since there are those modified starches in those jarred cheeses, it might take a little more work at the end to get some of that clump cheese out. But as you can see, the more you work this cheese, the more it thickens, the more it breaks down that Parmigiano and that Pecorino. I know a lot of you might have thought that was a ton of cheese to be putting in those eggs. But as you can see, it disappears almost straight away. those eggs break down the fibers of that cheese and it becomes this nice paste. You want it to kind of have a pasty consistency. At this point, I still feel like it's a little too loose, so I will eventually add a little more pecorino and parmigiano. Now, this next step is not, readily traditional, but since we're doing a Cajun carbonara, we're going to go ahead and start adding in our Cajun seasoning. Again, we're not measuring. What I'm looking for here is for these eggs to turn a nice orangey red hue. And that's pretty much what we have here. I'm kind of satisfied with that. We're not throwing away the rest or storing the rest of our Cajun seasoning because we need to keep that on hand later as we're building the sauce. Just in the event our sauce does not have enough flavor, we do need that on hand. All right, so now that we have our sauce completely put together, it's time to return to the stove and rock out the rest of this carbonara. All right, now that we have successfully established our carbonara cream, this chicken is probably only 1.5 to 2 minutes away from being completely cooked. So I went ahead and turned on my pasta water. Unlike when I make normal Italian foods, I salted this water a little bit less because we have so many salty elements already going on. We've got a lot of salt in that Cajun seasoning. We've got salt coming from the pork. And of course, we have a heavy load of cheese. So when we start making this sauce in the pan and we're tossing in that pasta water, we do not want to create an excess of sodium. So there's probably only about 2 teaspoons of kosher salt in this water. And now our chicken's pretty much ready to come up off the heat. So we're going to remove this pan and put our chicken in a paper towel lined bowl and let that drain off. So what we're going to do now is on that same burner over medium-high heat, we're going to drop down a large skillet, a large pan. We need it to be large because we need room for the pasta to move in this pan afterwards. So a small pan just can't work with this. So this next step is pretty optional if you are using guanciale, which has a higher fat content. What I did here is just add a small amount, maybe a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. And the reason why I did that is because the pancetta is very lean. There's some fat on it, but there's just not enough to create the kind of fat we need at the bottom of the pan. That fat, once this bacon and pancetta renders out, is going to help form the flavor of our carbonara sauce. That grease is going to get soaked up by the noodles and combine with the eggs and the cheese to make that rich umami flavor. So if you're using these really nice and lean pancetta like I have, you're going to want to add a little bit of olive oil to the pan to help the crisping and the frying process. And plus, that's also going to help bring out the oils of the pancetta and the bacon. So what we're going to do now is crisp this up really good. And we want these to be nice and rendered down. We want to see a good bit of oil in the bottom of the pan. If our pork starts to fry up a little too quickly, we'll adjust the heat back down. We want this bacon coming up off the heat about the same time the noodles go in. So what you're about to see me do is a pro move, especially if you're new to making carbonara. I'm just going to temper these eggs with maybe just 1/4 cup of that boiling pasta water. And what that's going to do is help bring up the temp of those eggs. Because if the pan is too hot when you put this egg mixture in, they will scramble. So kind of like what we do when we make custard, you add a little bit of that hot liquid in, mix it up, let it start pre-emulsifying. As you can see here, a lot of that egg is starting to loosen up. Some of that cheese is starting to break down. By doing this, we give ourselves less of a chance of failure in the sauce. Okay, it's time for pasta, and tonight we're just going to be using this spaghetti. In the Zatarain's meal, they use, I think, linguine or fettuccine, but we are playing it true to the original dish, which is spaghetti alla carbonara. This is the spirit of true fusion style cooking. One of the biggest complaints from Italians that watch food influencers, or even Italian food influencers, is the fact that we totally abandon their culture when making American versions of their food, calling it a bastardization of their culture and their cuisine. They are gatekeepers of their traditions. They're gatekeepers of their culture. So their food is super important and a super important part of their identity. So I do feel like when we do fusion cooking, we need to at least respect and give a healthy nod to the people of those wonderful cultures that give us those foods. And today that is Italy. Guys, I've learned so much about Italian food and cooking from Vincenzo Prosperi, which is the guy from Vincenzo's Plate. He is my favorite Italian food influencer, and he's honestly one of the top 5 food influencers that I watch. I love him, and guys, because of him, I've learned some things about Italian cooking. So one of my goals coming up, I don't know how soon I'm going to be able to do it because I do need to get myself back on my feet financially, because that surgery took a lot out of me. But I do want to get into making my own pastas from scratch. And when I do, I would love to re-upload a traditional version of Alfredo, because there's no cream in Alfredo, just as there is no cream in carbonara. And I'm sorry if I misled you guys in those videos, because it was my belief at the time, because I didn't know. I thought cream was actually, a big part of this, but that's an American thing. And Vincenzo, if you're watching this, man, I love you, and I hope you enjoy the video. So our bacon and pancetta is almost done, but we still need a couple more minutes on our pasta. So I already went ahead and turned down the heat to a medium heat to slowly render out the rest of our pork items without overcooking them. All right, so you see all this oil that's at the bottom of the pan now that has been extracted from the pancetta and bacon? That's what we want to see. We need a somewhat generous portion of oil at the bottom, but from the way it looks now, there may in fact be a little too much grease, but that's not to worry. And another thing I'm going to tell you is I am undercooking the pasta by about 2 minutes, because we're going to finish cooking it in the pan, and if it's completely tender before it hits the pan, it's going to turn to mush, and that is not something you want. So you're going to have to trust the process here. And at this point, our bacon and pancetta mixture have been fully cooked. They're nice and crispy, so it's time to take them off the heat. I'm going to put the majority of them in the same bowl as our chicken, but I'm reserving some to the side on a separate plate with a paper towel for garnish. And as I predicted, there's just a little too much grease in this pan. You really only want about 2 tablespoons worth of oil. So I'm just going to drain that into a small bowl, and this next step cannot be skipped. We have to immediately turn the heat off of our pan, because if we keep the heat running and we put the noodles and everything in it, we're going to scramble our eggs. The rest of this sauce is going to come together and cook with the pasta water, and it's going to cook with the heat of the noodles. So we need to make sure that that pan is on a burner that is turned completely off. So that's what we've done here. All right, it's finally the moment of truth where everything comes together. It is time to put this pasta in the pan. And keep in mind, we want that pasta water in there. So big tongfuls at a time, we're going to put the soaking wet hot pasta in the pan. And it's already going to start absorbing that nice pancetta and bacon grease. All right, also important to note is I am keeping my pasta water on the heat. I am doing this in the event we need extra pasta water to loosen things up, and that way there's extra heat coming into the pan to fully cook our sauce. All right, so what I'm doing here is just giving it a nice professional toss in that bacon and pancetta grease, getting everything acquainted. Now we're putting all of our meats in, except the small amount that we kept for garnish, and now we're just going to take our tongs and kind of fold everything in. You kind of want to move everything around, make sure all of those oils and the seasonings from all those meats get put in. Technically, you could try to toss this, but it's too big of a pan and it's way too heavy. So I didn't want to end up creating a spaghetti incident or catastrophe on this stove. So I'm just making sure everything gets a nice whirl around in the pan so all those flavors can, combine to marinate. And you know what? That wasn't a half bad toss, but I'm not attempting that again. All right, so now is the moment of truth that we have to be careful with. We're adding in small amounts, our carbonara cream. Even though this pan is off the heat, it still retains a good amount of heat. And I do not want to leave an excessive amount of this egg mixture on the pan because I do not trust it not to cook like a scrambled egg. So it is very important to keep the pasta moving. That way the heat distributes evenly from those noodles and it breaks down that cheese and egg. It is a bit thick and chunky because of those starches in the processed cheese. So I'm adding a little extra of that pasta water in to help break things down, and I can automatically feel some relief. It breaks it down really, really quickly. And as you can see, there's no cooked eggs anywhere in here, but it's still not to the point where it's a sauce. Now that we have successfully emulsified the first part of our sauce, we're adding the rest of it in right on top of those noodles. Again, that prevents anything from scrambling or cooking. So now we're just going to go ahead and toss the rest of that mass into our noodles. And I'm still seeing a lot of chunky stuff, but if you're paying attention to the bottom of the pan here, you're starting to see some serious emulsification happening. It's starting to turn into like a loose grease, which is the first stage of the carbonara sauce. Again, more pasta water. It is your friend here. All right, and that seems to be enough. Don't waterlog it, but in case you do and it starts to become too thin or too runny, you can fix that by adding extra cheese. Always make sure you have extra everything on hand. Now, look at the bottom of this pan, guys. You're starting to see a sauce. And this is why I tempered everything beforehand. It ensures your success. Now, there's still obviously some chunks and clumps of egg and cheese. I'm constantly keeping this in motion. And guys, even though we're working on a coal burner, putting everything together, this pasta retains heat super good. And then, of course, the extra liquid also brings up the pan temp. So you don't have to worry about cold noodles or cold meat. Everything is going to be piping hot. And as you can see, we're continually working. And look at that. That is cream sauce that is forming. It's all over the noodles, and I am incredibly happy with the result. All right, so now the next thing I need to do is to taste it, because just from looking at this, I do not feel there's enough flavor here. So we're going to go ahead and snag us a quick bite. And guys, honestly, I taste the carbonara and it is absolutely freaking delicious, but that Cajun flavor is seriously diluted, which is what I thought would happen once we incorporated the pasta water and everything in there. So we're just going to go ahead and season this up the rest of the way with, of course, the rest of our Parmigiano and Romano, and then our Cajun seasoning. All right, and now that we've gotten a nice couple pinches of everything in there, we're going to go ahead and start mixing it back up. We're probably going to need a little extra pasta water too. I also added a little Parmigiano since I didn't have any more Romano after that. So we're going to add that pasta water in, and we are going to keep tossing it. At this point, I'm not really worried about a runny carbonara, because we added that extra cheese. And of course, the dry seasoning is going to help thicken things up a little bit. So we're just making sure all of our flavors are very well combined at this point. Twirling it around like a pro. We want this to be as much Cajun as it is carbonara. All right, at this point, I feel like everything is really well combined. So I'm going to go in for another taste. And guys, I'll be honest with you, this is simply one of the best things I've ever put in my mouth. This is my first carbonara, but the flavor is just unrivaled. I've never had a pasta taste this good using just generally simple ingredients, and that's the brilliance of cooking. That's the brilliance of the Italian way of doing things. All right, that being said, let's plate this up and try it out. All right, guys, and that is it. And I'm probably, from the way this looks, the absolute worst at plating pasta, but there's still a lot to learn. And I will tell you that this comes together super quick. If I was not recording a video of this, this would have been done in about 35 minutes, maybe a little less, which technically makes this also weeknight gourmet. You're welcome. I love those types of things. So now I know if I'm on a time-cramped weekday, I can make an incredibly delicious meal just like this in less than an hour. All right, so let's go ahead and go in. And just from that taste test, that second taste test, there's just a certain uniqueness to this pasta that I've not experienced in any other type of pasta. Man, y'all really make it look easy doing the spoon twirl thing. Hands down, you don't taste the egg at all. You've got that right amount of Cajun seasoning. The Parmesan on top. The umami. Excuse me. From the bacon and pancetta. This is a 10 out of 10. And guys, this is what I mean by true fusion cooking. We've definitely respected the classic Italian dish spaghetti alla carbonara. And the execution of the sauce, the choice of noodles. And there was a little variation on cheese, but guys, locally that is just technically hard for me to find. And then we blended it together with real Cajun seasoning, chicken, bacon, pancetta. This is just such a unique flavor, I can't describe it. It tastes like no other pasta I've ever had. And is absolutely, positively, one of my top pastas ever. And this is actually my first attempt at making a carbonara. So this turned out super well. You guys need to give this a try. And the one thing I will say about Zatarain's, I have not checked their Romano and see if it's actually legit Romano or like a lot of these other brands to keep things affordable. They use imitation Romano, but the one thing that I will say is they used cream in their carbonara, and that is cardinal sin. So if all of you Italians are watching this video, I respect you. I love you. Guys, I may have mentioned this in the voiceover. I've learned a lot about Italian cooking and traditional cuisine from Vincenzo's Plate. I'm a huge fan of his. If you haven't subscribed to his channel, please do. I absolutely respect and love this guy. Vincenzo, if you ever have the chance of watching this video, I love you, man, and keep doing what you do. You're one of my top, you're in my top 5 of food influencers. All right, fanboy time is over. It's time to eat dinner. And guys, you have to make this. See you in the next video.